Hello, my name is Brock Sanderson, 35 years old. I am the eldest son of the Sanderson family, a wealthy and influential lineage in the Hamptons, New York. I manage the family's investment fund, and my life, at least from the outside, appears to be a picture of perfection. But if you look closer, you'll see the cracks, secrets, injustices, and the burdens I've carried on my shoulders for years. I stand before the large glass window in my office, gazing down at the bustling Manhattan streets below. Cars glide by in an endless stream, neon lights flicker and reflect on the glass, and I feel an indescribable emptiness creeping into my chest. I'm not one to complain. Truly, I was raised not to. But today, something in the air makes me want to pause, to reflect on what has brought me here. Standing at the pinnacle of power and responsibility, yet strangely alone. The Sanderson family. If you live in the Hamptons or anywhere within New York's elite circles, this name is no stranger. We are a symbol of wealth, of sprawling beachfront estates, of lavish parties the world covets an invitation to. My father, Philip Sanderson, built a real estate empire from scratch, and my mother, Julia, with her refined taste and skillful diplomacy, turned the Sanderson name into a brand. To outsiders, they are the perfect couple. Strong, powerful, and untouchable. But I, more than anyone, know that things are not so simple. I grew up in a world where everything was calculated. From perfectly tailored suits to the way I had to smile in family photos, everything had to reflect the Sanderson perfection. As the eldest son, I was taught that responsibility is everything. I learned to manage the family's investment fund as a teenager, sitting through meetings I only half understood but nodding as if I had it all figured out. My father always said, "Brock, you are the keeper of this family's flame. Never let it go out." And I've done just that, day after day, year after year, until it became a part of me, like breathing, like a heartbeat. But then there's Lance, my younger brother. Oh, Lance. Just thinking about him is enough to make me want to laugh and sigh at the same time. Lance, 28 years old, is the embodiment of rebellion. If I am the carefully tended flame, Lance is a storm tearing through everything in its path. He's handsome, charismatic, with a smile that could charm anyone. But Lance doesn't care about responsibility, the family, or it seems even himself. He lives as if tomorrow doesn't exist, partying all night, gambling, and fleeting romances I've long stopped keeping track of. Our parents always shield Lance as if he's a precious gem to be protected from his own mistakes. He's still young, my mother often says, her voice gentle but resolute. He'll grow up. But I know, and deep down she knows too, that Lance is not just young. I remember when we were kids running through the sprawling lawns of our Hamptons estate. I, the serious older brother, always tried to keep Lance out of trouble. Once he broke a priceless antique vase that my father cherished, and I took the blame. My father punished me, scolded me harshly. Lance, meanwhile, just grinned, that mischievous smile I both loved and hated. "Thanks, Brock," he said before running off to play again. Back then I thought I was protecting him. But now, looking back, I wonder if I unwittingly enabled his irresponsibility. The favoritism my parents show Lance is nothing new. It's like an old wound, quietly aching, but I've learned to live with it. When I aced my college entrance exams, my father merely nodded and said, "Good job, Brock. That's what I expect from you." But when Lance failed his driving test for the third time, my mother hugged him, comforting him with, "It's okay, you'll do better next time." I'm not jealous, at least I tell myself I'm not. But deep down I feel the injustice. I've spent my entire life doing the right thing, keeping the Sanderson family's flame burning bright, but it never seems enough to earn the loving gaze my parents reserve for Lance. Amid all this chaos, I'm fortunate to have Olivia. My wife, Olivia, is the light of my life. She's 34, a talented endocrinologist working at a prestigious Manhattan hospital. Olivia doesn't belong to the glitzy world of the Sandersons, and that's exactly why I love her. We met 6 years ago at a charity fundraiser my family hosted. I still remember the moment she walked into the room wearing a simple yet elegant blue dress, her brown hair cascading loosely, and a warm smile that seemed unfazed by the opulence around her. She stood there, chatting with a group of doctors about the latest endocrinology research, and I was instantly captivated. Olivia is intelligent, perceptive, and above all, grounded. She doesn't get swept up in my family's drama or blinded by the Sanderson name's allure. To her, I'm not Brock Sanderson, heir to an empire, but just Brock, a man who sometimes feels tired, sometimes doubts himself, but always tries to do the right thing. Olivia is the only person I can share my deepest thoughts with, the fears I wouldn't dare admit to anyone else. She listens without judgment and offers sharp, trustworthy advice. Last week, my brother caused another mess. I got a call from a casino in Atlantic City where Lance had lost tens of thousands of dollars and left an unpaid bill. I had to fly there, sort everything out, and bring him home, drunk. As usual, my parents just sighed and told me to keep an eye on your brother. I wanted to scream, to ask them why I'm always the one cleaning up Lance's messes. And in moments like that, my wife is the anchor that keeps me sane. But today, when Lance called me this morning, his voice was different. It wasn't the usual confident, evasive tone I was accustomed to. There was a tremor, an unease I had never heard from him before. "Brock, I need to see you. It's big." Those words echoed in my mind as I sat in my office, watching the clock tick slowly. I didn't know what bomb he was about to drop, but my gut told me it wouldn't be as simple as another debt or a drunken escapade. As I prepared to leave the office to meet Lance, my phone rang again. This time it was my mother, Julia. Her voice was icy, as if she were holding back a storm. "Brock, come home tonight. We need a family meeting. It's important." No explanation, no hint of warmth. My chest tightened. A call from my mother in that tone could only mean one thing. It was about Lance. I replied curtly, "Yes, Mother," and hung up, feeling like a soldier gearing up for battle. I drove to the Hamptons, the familiar route from Manhattan to the family estate, stretching longer than usual. The lush green trees lining the road, the sunset glinting off the ocean, all of it was picturesque, but I couldn't enjoy it. My mind was racing with questions. What had Lance done? What scandal was it this time? And why had my mother called a family meeting? I texted Olivia, telling her I'd be late and might need her by my side tonight. She didn't pry, only replying to drive safely. When I arrived at the Sanderson estate, night had fallen. The sprawling mansion with its marble columns and stained glass windows glowed under the chandelier's light. The butler, Harold, opened the door, offering a polite smile, but his eyes betrayed worry. "Master Brock, everyone's waiting in the grand living room," he said, his voice almost a whisper. I nodded and stepped inside, immediately sensing the heavy atmosphere. My father, Philip, sat in his large leather armchair, a glass of whiskey in hand, his gaze sharp as a blade. My mother stood by the window, arms tightly crossed, her deep green silk dress accentuating her commanding presence. And Lance, he sat on the sofa, head bowed, hands clasped tightly as if trying to keep himself from unraveling. No one spoke as I entered, but their eyes said it all. A storm was brewing. "Brock, sit," my father said, his voice low but authoritative. I pulled up a chair, sitting down and trying to maintain a calm exterior despite the chaos swirling inside me. "What's going on?" I asked, my eyes moving from my father to my mother, then settling on Lance. He didn't look up, only mumbled something incoherent. My mother took a deep breath, as if summoning all her courage. "Lance has something to announce," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "And we need your help, Brock." As always. Her words cut like a knife, not because of their meaning, but because of the way she emphasized, "as always." I felt a surge of anger but suppressed it, nodding for them to continue. Lance finally looked up, his eyes red as if he'd been crying or hadn't slept all night. "Brock," he began, his voice choking, I'm getting married." I blinked, processing the information. Married? Lance, who never stayed with a woman for more than 3 months, was talking about a wedding? I almost laughed, but the panic in his eyes stopped me. To whom? I asked, my voice steady but my mind already conjuring up scenarios. Some girl from a party? A model? A gold digger? With Lance, anything was possible. Vivian Bennett, Lance replied, his voice barely a whisper. She's pregnant. The words detonated like a bomb in the room. I felt the blood rush to my head, not out of surprise, but because I knew the name Vivian. She was a 25-year-old model from a modest background, someone I'd met a couple of times. But pregnant? If true, this was a serious problem. My father slammed his whiskey glass onto the table, the clink of glass against wood ringing like a gunshot. Pregnant before marriage, he roared. Do you have any idea how much this will disgrace the family, Lance? My mother stepped forward, placing a hand on his shoulder to calm him, but her eyes were just as cold. We can handle this, she said firmly, but we need a plan. And then, as always, both my parents' eyes turned to me. Brock, my mother said, you'll take care of this. You always know how to keep things under control. I wanted to protest, to say I was tired of cleaning up Lance's messes, but I couldn't. The family's reputation, the Sanderson name, was a burden I'd carried my whole life. I just nodded like a machine. Lance began to explain, his voice halting. Vivian had come to him last week announcing she was 4 months pregnant and demanding he marry her. If he refused, she threatened to go to the press, turning the Sanderson family into the center of a scandal. She says she has proof, Lance mumbled. Photos, texts, everything. I looked at him, searching for a shred of responsibility in his eyes, but all I saw was panic. Are you sure it's yours? I asked, my voice colder than I intended. Lance hesitated, then nodded. She says so, and I think it's true. I wanted to shake him, to ask why he let things spiral this far, but I stayed silent. My mother spoke again, her voice now calmer. We'll have a wedding, a grand wedding to quash any suspicion. No one must think this is a forced marriage. Brock, you'll oversee everything. The venue, the guest list, the media. We'll make this a memorable event, like every Sanderson affair. I felt a wave of anger surge within me. Me again. Always me. But I just nodded, as always. All right, I said. I'll handle it. My father looked at me, his gaze softening slightly, but he said nothing. Lance kept his head down as if he knew he'd just thrown me into another mess. When I left the estate that night, my mind was spinning. A wedding? A baby? A potential scandal? I drove back to Manhattan feeling like the weight of the world was on my shoulders. When I stepped into our apartment, Olivia was waiting, sitting on the sofa with a glass of wine and a medical journal in hand. She looked up, her sharp but concerned eyes meeting mine. Brock, are you okay? She asked, standing and wrapping her arms around me. I told her everything, about Lance, Vivian, the wedding I was now forced to organize. Olivia listened without interrupting, but I could see her analyzing, as she did with complex medical cases. When I finished, she took my hand, her voice gentle but firm. Brock, I know you feel responsible for your family, but this time, something's off. You need to be careful. Careful of what? I asked. Though deep down I knew she was right, Olivia always saw what I missed. This Vivian girl, Olivia said, a glint of suspicion in her eyes. If she's willing to threaten your entire family to get married, it might not just be about a baby. You need to dig deeper. I nodded, a chill running through me. Olivia was right. Something wasn't right, and I would have to uncover the truth, even if it meant confronting Lance, Vivian, or even my own family. But right now, I don't have time to think too much. A grand wedding awaits me to organize, and as always, I have to ensure everything goes perfectly, at least on the surface. 2 weeks after the family meeting, I found myself at the center of a whirlwind. Lance and Vivian's wedding was planned at a luxurious resort in the Hamptons, a venue the Sanderson family often chose for major events. This wasn't just a wedding. It was a statement, a performance to solidify our family's standing among the elite. I'd been working tirelessly, coordinating with the event team, from selecting a Michelin-starred chef's menu to ensuring a live orchestra from Paris would arrive on time. My mother insisted there could be no mistakes, and my father merely nodded as if everything was already under control. The resort was transformed into a lavish paradise. The pathways leading to the main venue were adorned with white orchids and sparkling crystal lanterns. A luxury yacht was chartered for a dinner party on the sea for the second night. Hundreds of guests, from real estate tycoons to Hollywood stars, had confirmed their attendance. The cost of the 4-day wedding celebration reached millions of dollars, but for the Sandersons, money was never the issue. The issue was reputation, and I was tasked with keeping it untarnished. I stood on the resort's balcony looking down at the outdoor reception area being set up. The tables were draped in white silk, each wine glass polished to a gleam, and the air was filled with the scent of fresh flowers. But inside, my unease grew stronger. Olivia was right. Something was off, though I couldn't yet put my finger on it. All I knew was that Vivian, the bride-to-be, was at the heart of my suspicions. The first day of the wedding festivities began with a cocktail party by the pool. I wore a perfectly tailored gray suit standing beside Olivia, who looked radiant in a turquoise silk dress. She smiled, shook hands with guests, but I knew she was observing. Olivia was always like that, sharp, refined, and never missing a detail. "You okay?" she whispered as we stood near the bar where champagne was being poured endlessly. "I'm fine," I replied, but my voice lacked conviction. Olivia tilted her head, her eyes suggesting she knew I was hiding something. "You're thinking about Vivian, aren't you?" she asked. I nodded, unwilling to lie. "She's over there," Olivia said, pointing to a corner of the party area where Vivian stood, dazzling in a vibrant red dress, laughing with a group of guests. Vivian Bennett. I had to admit she was magnetic. Her golden blonde hair, sparkling blue eyes, and confident smile made it seem like she was born for this world. But there was something about the way she moved, the way she spoke, that felt inauthentic. She was too perfect, too performative. I watched her from afar, trying to spot signs of a woman 4 months pregnant, but I saw nothing. No fatigue, no slower gait, none of the signs I'd noticed in pregnant women before. Olivia squeezed my hand, pulling me from my thoughts. "Brock, I noticed something," she said, her voice low so no one could overhear. "Vivian isn't drinking alcohol. That's normal for a pregnant woman, right? But she's also refusing juice, sticking to plain water. And have you seen how she eats? She just ate sashimi over there." Olivia gestured toward the buffet table where a plate of salmon sashimi had a few pieces left. "Pregnant women usually avoid raw food. She's not acting like someone who's pregnant." I frowned, processing her words. "Maybe she's just careless?" I said, but even I could hear the lack of conviction in my voice. Olivia shook her head. "No, Brock. Something's not right. I'm a doctor, I know these signs. She hasn't gained weight, shows no signs of fatigue, nothing. And have you noticed how she shows off her baby bump? She always places her hand on her stomach when someone mentions the baby, but it feels too theatrical." I glanced at Vivian again. She was laughing loudly, her hand resting lightly on her stomach as if deliberately drawing attention. A group of older women surrounded her, asking about the baby, and Vivian responded with exaggerated enthusiasm. "Oh, it's already kicking," she said, her voice high-pitched. But Olivia was right. It didn't feel genuine. The way she performed, the way she dodged specific questions, it all raised red flags. On the second night of the wedding, Olivia and I had a private moment in the resort's garden. The moonlight illuminated the rose bushes, and the sound of waves crashing against the shore created a soothing melody. I held Olivia's hand, feeling like she was my only anchor in this storm. "I think she's lying, Brock," Olivia said bluntly, no sugarcoating. "I'm not sure, but I don't believe she's pregnant." I sighed, rubbing my temples. If she's lying, then why? Why go so far as to force Lance to marry her? What does she want? Olivia looked at me, her gaze sharp yet gentle. Money? Power? Revenge? Who knows, Brock? But you need to find out. If she's playing a game, your family and Lance are being used. I nodded, a weight pressing on my chest. I didn't want to believe Vivian was orchestrating a charade, But Olivia's instincts were rarely wrong. I decided to pay closer attention, ask questions, and observe. I started with Lance, but as usual, he dodged me. "Brock, I don't want to talk about this," he said when I tried to pull him aside during the yacht dinner party. "Vivian says she's pregnant, and I believe her. That's enough." "You believe her?" I asked, my voice sharper than intended. "You don't even know the due date, Lance. Have you asked her who her doctor is? Have you seen any medical records?" Lance glared at me, his eyes a mix of anger and panic. "Why do you always have to dig into everything, Brock? Can't you just let me be?" I wanted to shout, to tell him I was trying to protect him, to protect our family, but I just shook my head and walked away. Lance never changes, and I, as always, was stuck in the role of the fixer. By the third day, the official wedding day, I was more stressed than ever. Vivian appeared in a pristine white wedding gown, its long train flowing behind her, a delicate veil fluttering in the breeze. She looked like a princess, but her eyes, cold, calculating, sent a shiver down my spine. I stood in my role as overseer, ensuring everything ran smoothly, but my mind was racing with doubts. Olivia, standing beside me during the ceremony, whispered, "Brock, I checked something. Vivian said she's been getting prenatal care at a hospital in Manhattan, but I called them and they have no record of her." I turned to her, my heart pounding. "You're sure?" I asked. Olivia nodded. "Positive. Brock, she's hiding something, and we need to find out what before this goes too far." I looked at Vivian holding Lance's hand, smiling at the guests. But her smile was too polished, too fake. A chill ran down my spine. Olivia was right. Something was wrong, and I wouldn't let my family be dragged into a deception. I squeezed Olivia's hand and whispered, "Tonight we confront her. This can't go on." The third day of the wedding at the Hamptons resort passed like a whirlwind of extravagance. The cocktail party by the pool had just ended, leaving behind sparkling champagne glasses and echoes of laughter in the salty sea air. The guests, real estate moguls, television stars, were still immersed in the grandeur of the Sanderson name. But I couldn't lose myself in the festivities. Every smile, every handshake, was just a facade hiding the storm raging inside me. Olivia and I had been watching Vivian for 3 days, and our suspicions, her suspicions, now mine, were growing stronger. I took a deep breath, trying to sort through the chaos in my mind. I didn't want to believe Vivian was a fraud, but I couldn't ignore the signs. And Lance, my brother whom I'd protected my entire life, might be hiding something far worse than I'd imagined. "All right," I said, my voice resolute. "We'll talk to her now." I asked a resort staff member to invite Vivian to a small meeting room downstairs, under the pretense of discussing some final wedding details. Olivia and I entered the room first, a quiet space with dark wooden walls and a long table in the center. My heart was pounding as if I were about to step into a battle I wasn't sure I'd win or lose. Vivian appeared a few minutes later, still in her vibrant red dress from the cocktail party. Her smile bright, but her eyes glinting with a trace of wariness. "Brock, Olivia," she said, her voice sweet as honey. "Is something important?" I thought everything was set for tomorrow. "Sit down, Vivian," I said, gesturing to a velvet-upholstered chair. She sat, maintaining her smile, but I noticed her hands gripping the edge of her dress as if trying to suppress her nerves. Olivia stood beside me, her gaze sharp yet gentle, like a doctor preparing to diagnose a complex case. "Vivian," I began, keeping my voice steady to mask the torrent of emotions inside. "We want to talk about the baby." Her smile faltered just for a moment, but it was enough to tell me we were on the right track. "The baby?" she repeated, her voice slightly higher than usual. "What do you mean?" Olivia stepped forward, her tone soft but authoritative. "Vivian, I'm an endocrinologist. I've been observing you over the past few days, and some things have made me curious. You say you're 4 months pregnant, correct?" Vivian nodded, but her eyes began to waver. "Yes, that's right," she said, her hand instinctively resting on her stomach like a rehearsed gesture. "Then," Olivia continued, It's odd that you show no signs of pregnancy at this stage. No weight gain, no fatigue, no visible hormonal changes. You ate sashimi last night, which most pregnant women avoid. And I checked. The hospital you said you're getting prenatal care from has no record of you. Can you explain? The air in the room grew heavy, as if all sound had been sucked out. Vivian's eyes darted from Olivia to me, her smile vanishing. I don't understand what you mean, she said, her voice trembling. I'm pregnant. Lance knows that. I leaned forward, locking eyes with her. Vivian, if you're lying, now's the time to tell the truth. We don't want to hurt you, but we need to know. Why are you forcing Lance to marry you? Why lie about the baby? Vivian blinked rapidly as if searching for an escape. Then suddenly she let out a dry, joyless laugh. You think you're so clever, don't you? She said, her voice turning cold. You think I'm some gold digger trying to scam the Sandersons. My heart pounded, but not out of anger. It was because I knew we were close to the truth. If that's not the case, then tell us, I said firmly. Why, Vivian? Why go through all this? Vivian lowered her head, her shoulders trembling. For a moment, I thought she might cry. But when she looked up, her eyes were red. Not with shame, but with deep pain. You want the truth? She said, her voice choking. Fine. I'm not pregnant. I was never pregnant. Her confession hit me like a punch to the chest. Olivia remained calm, but I could see her hands tighten as if she too was shocked. Then why? I asked, my voice almost a whisper. Why go this far? Vivian took a deep breath as if summoning all her courage. 2 years ago, she began, her voice trembling. Lance and I had a child. I was pregnant for real, but Lance, he didn't want it. He pressured me to get an abortion, said a baby would ruin his life. I loved him, so I listened. But the procedure, it went wrong. There were complications, and the doctor told me I'd never be able to have children again. Her words spilled out raw with pain. My blood ran cold. Lance, my brother. I knew he was reckless, but this was unforgivable. Olivia squeezed my hand under the table as if anchoring me from falling apart. Vivian, Olivia said, her voice gentle yet full of empathy. I'm so sorry, but why fake a pregnancy? Why force him to marry you? Vivian looked at us, tears streaming down her face. Because he destroyed me, she said, her voice a mix of pain and anger. After that, Lance still came to me, but only when he was drunk, only to use me. Then he'd leave like I was nothing. I lost everything because of him, my chance to be a mother, my self-respect, everything. So I decided if he wouldn't take responsibility, I'd make him. I knew the Sandersons feared a scandal more than anything. I threatened to go public, and they pushed Lance to marry me. I sat there, speechless. Everything I'd thought about Lance, his recklessness, his irresponsibility, came into sharp focus. But at the same time, I felt a strange empathy for Vivian. She wasn't the schemer I'd assumed. She was a woman broken, driven to desperation by my own brother. Vivian, I finally said, my voice hoarse with emotion, why didn't you tell the truth from the start? We could have helped you. Vivian shook her head, tears still falling. Who would believe me? I'm just a model, Lance's plaything. No one in your world cares about me, but please keep this a secret. I'll leave. I'll cancel the wedding, I promise. I'll disappear quietly. Olivia looked at me, her eyes filled with concern. Vivian, she said gently, we understand your pain. But keeping this secret, it won't bring justice. If you want Lance to take responsibility, we'll help you, but you need to be honest with us. Vivian buried her face in her hands, sobbing. I don't know what to do anymore, she whispered. I love Lance, but I hate him too. I'm sorry for deceiving everyone. Please don't tell anyone. Let me go. I looked at Vivian, then at Olivia. What do you think we should do? I asked, my voice rough with emotion. Olivia tilted her head, her eyes thoughtful. Brock, if we expose the truth right now during the wedding, it'll be a disaster. Not just for your family, but for Vivian too. She's in a desperate situation, and going public will only hurt her more. I think we should keep this quiet, at least for now. I looked at Vivian, still clutching her face, her shoulders shaking with sobs. I felt a deep empathy for her, but also a burning anger toward Lance. He hadn't just hurt Vivian, he'd put me in this position. Once again, I was cleaning up his mess. But Olivia was right. Exposing the truth now would only make things worse. I needed a way to protect the family's reputation while ensuring Lance couldn't keep dodging responsibility. "Vivian," I said finally, my voice firm despite the turmoil inside. "I won't tell anyone, at least not now, but I don't want you to leave." She looked up, her eyes wide with confusion. "What do you mean?" she whispered. "I want you to go through with the wedding," I said, each word feeling like a heavy stone. "Not because I want to protect Lance, but because I want him to face what he's done. If you leave, he'll slip away scot-free like always. I want him to marry you, to live with you, and to learn to take responsibility, but I promise you I won't let my family hurt you. You have my word." Vivian stared at me, her eyes wavering between fear and doubt. You'll keep this secret?" she asked, her voice trembling. "You won't tell your parents?" I nodded, though it felt like betraying myself. "I'll keep it secret for now. After the wedding, I'll find a way to make Lance face the truth. And I'll make sure you're protected, Vivian. You have my word." Olivia looked at me, her eyes filled with concern but also a hint of approval. She knew I was struggling, knew this decision went against my every instinct, but she also knew it was the only way to keep everything from collapsing, for now. Vivian wiped her tears, nodding weakly. "All right," she whispered. "I'll do as you say. I'll go through with the wedding, but please, don't leave me alone in this." "We won't leave you alone," Olivia said, her voice gentle but certain. "We're here, Vivian. We'll help you." She nodded, but her eyes were still full of pain. I stood up, feeling the weight of the world on my shoulders. "You should get back to the party," I said. "People will start wondering if you're gone too long." Vivian stood, wiping her tears quickly, trying to regain her radiant composure. She left the room, leaving Olivia and me in heavy silence. When the door closed, I turned to Olivia, feeling like I'd just run a marathon. "Do you think I did the right thing?" I asked, my voice hoarse with exhaustion. Olivia took my hand, her gaze soft but resolute. "You did the best you could in this situation, Brock. But you know this isn't the end. Lance needs to face consequences, and we'll find a way to make this right." The next day, the wedding ceremony unfolded like a perfect dream. Vivian walked down the aisle in her stunning white gown. Lance stood at the altar with a forced smile. The guests clapped, champagne flowed, and the Hampton sun shone brilliantly on everything. I stood there, overseeing every detail, ensuring no mistakes, but inside I felt hollow. Olivia stood beside me, her hand brushing mine, a reminder that we were facing this together. None of the guests knew about the confrontation the night before. No one knew about the secret we were keeping. The wedding went off without a hitch, as if nothing had happened. But I knew deep down that this truth couldn't stay buried forever. And when it surfaced, it would change everything. 2 weeks after the wedding, I called my parents, asking them to come to the Sanderson estate in the Hamptons for a family meeting. I told them it was urgent, related to Lance. I didn't mention Vivian or reveal any details, but my mother's voice over the phone was laced with worry. Olivia and I drove to the Hamptons on a chilly autumn afternoon with golden and crimson leaves falling along the road. The estate loomed ahead, its marble columns and sprawling lawns a reminder of the legacy I was raised to protect. But today I wasn't here to protect. I was here to confront. As we entered the grand living room, my parents were already there. My father, Philip, sat in his leather armchair, a glass of whiskey in hand, exuding his usual air of authority. My mother, Julia, looked impeccable in a tailored blazer, but her eyes betrayed her unease. Lance sat on the sofa, his posture slouched but his gaze defensive. Vivian stood near the window, her body tense, her face pale. "Brock, what is this about?" My father demanded, his voice icy. "You said it was urgent. Don't waste our time." I took a deep breath, feeling Olivia's hand brush against mine, a reminder that she was here with me. "This is about Lance," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside, "and Vivian, and the truth about their marriage." Lance shot up, his eyes flashing with anger. "What the hell are you talking about, Brock?" he snapped, but I caught a tremor in his voice as if he knew something was about to explode. I ignored him, turning to my parents. Before the wedding, Olivia and I spoke with Vivian. We had suspicions about her pregnancy, so we confronted her. She admitted something you all need to hear. I looked at Vivian, her head bowed, her hands clenched so tightly her knuckles were white. "Vivian, do you want to tell them, or should I?" She looked up, her eyes red, her voice trembling. I'm not pregnant," she said, her voice so soft it was barely audible. "I was never pregnant." The room fell into a heavy silence, so oppressive it felt like it could shatter glass. My mother gasped, her hand covering her mouth, her eyes wide with shock. My father gripped his whiskey glass tightly, his gaze sharp as a blade. "Not pregnant?" he roared. "You claimed you were pregnant to force us into this wedding. What is the meaning of this?" "Let her finish," I interrupted, my voice harder than I intended. "There's more." Vivian trembled but continued, her voice choking. 2 years ago I was pregnant with Lance's child, but he didn't want it. He pressured me to get an abortion, saying it would ruin his life. I loved him, so I did it. But the procedure, there were complications. The doctor told me I'd never be able to have children again. She paused, sobbing. After that, Lance still came to me, but only when he was drunk, only to use me. Then he'd leave like I was nothing. I faked the pregnancy to force him to marry me because I wanted him to take responsibility. The silence that followed was suffocating, so heavy I could hear my own heartbeat. My mother began to cry, her soft, stifled sobs breaking the quiet. My father stood abruptly, his glass trembling in his hand. "Do you have proof?" he demanded, his voice low and dangerous. Vivian nodded, her hands shaking as she pulled a folder from her bag. "These are my medical records," she said. "From the abortion and the complications, it's all here." My father snatched the folder, flipping through the pages with a rigid expression. Lance, his face flushed, leapt to his feet. "She's lying," he shouted, pointing at Vivian. "She's a fraud trying to trap me. I didn't force her to do anything." "Enough," I roared, stepping toward Lance, fighting the urge to punch him. "Don't you dare call her a liar, Lance. You did this. You pressured her into an abortion, you used her, and you thought you could get away with it like always. But not this time." My mother looked at me, tears streaming down her face. "Brock, why didn't you tell us before the wedding? Why did you let this happen?" I turned to her, my chest aching with guilt and anger. "Lance needs to take responsibility for what he's done. Do you know how much pain a woman feels when she loses the chance to be a mother?" My father stared at me, his expression unreadable. "What do you want us to do now, Brock?" he asked, his voice low but heavy with expectation. I took a deep breath, knowing my answer would shape the family's future. "Lance needs to be held accountable," I said. "He needs to make things right with Vivian, whether that means continuing the marriage or finding another way to atone. And we need to protect Vivian from any fallout. She's suffered enough." Vivian looked at me, her eyes filled with gratitude mixed with fear. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice faint as a breeze. The meeting ended in tense silence, with no clear resolution, only a promise to continue the discussion. But as Olivia and I drove back to Manhattan that night, I felt a strange sense of relief. The truth was out, and though the consequences would be painful, it was the first step toward doing what was right. For Vivian, and for myself. The weeks following the meeting in the Hamptons were suffocating. My parents, who had always maintained a perfect facade, now faced a reality they couldn't control. My mother, Julia, called me often, her voice a mix of anger and sorrow. "Brock, why did you have to stir everything up?" she asked during one call, her voice trembling. We could have handled this quietly. I wanted to tell her that silence wasn't the way to make things right, that covering up only made Lance worse, but I held my tongue. I knew she needed time to accept the truth about her beloved son. My father, Philip, was colder. He didn't blame me outright, but his eyes during our last meeting said it all. He was disappointed not just with Lance, but with me for shattering the perfect Sanderson veneer. My relationship with my parents grew strained, our family dinners now filled with uncomfortable silences. But I had no regrets. For the first time in my life, I felt I'd done the right thing. Not for the family, but for my own conscience. Lance, as I expected, refused to change. A week after the meeting, he called me, his voice brimming with anger and desperation. "You've ruined my life, Brock," he shouted over the phone. "Vivian's a snake and you took her side." I suppressed my anger, trying to keep my voice calm. "Lance, you're the one who hurt her. You need to take responsibility." But he hung up, unwilling to listen. Not long after, I heard from my mother that Lance had gone to a lawyer wanting to divorce Vivian immediately. He thought he could escape, as always. But this time, my parents didn't indulge him. In a meeting I wasn't invited to, they issued Lance an ultimatum. "You will stay with Vivian for at least 2 years," my father declared, his voice uncompromising. "You caused this and you will not run away. If you divorce, Vivian will receive a substantial settlement. This isn't a request, Lance. It's an order." I wasn't there, but my mother recounted it to me, and for the first time I saw a hint of resolve in how they dealt with Lance. Perhaps at last they realized their coddling had created a man incapable of accountability. Vivian, throughout this time, remained silent. She moved into a small apartment in Manhattan, funded by my family, but she rarely appeared in public. I met her once, at a small cafe near Olivia's hospital. She looked tired, but her eyes held less despair. "Thank you, Brock," she said, her voice soft but sincere. "I don't know what I would have done if you and Olivia hadn't stood up for me." I only nodded, unsure of what to say. I couldn't erase her pain, but I hoped in some way she'd find peace. A month later, as Olivia and I walked along the beach, I said, "I'm thinking about starting a charitable foundation." The idea had been brewing since the family meeting. A foundation to support women like Vivian, those hurt by toxic relationships. "I want to do something meaningful, Olivia. Not just to atone for what Lance did, but to create real change." Olivia stopped, her eyes shining. "That's a wonderful idea, Brock," she said, "and I'll help you. We can make it happen." I smiled, feeling like I could breathe easily for the first time in weeks. Standing there on the Hamptons beach with Olivia by my side, I realized something. The true value of family doesn't lie in reputation, grand estates, or lavish parties. It lies in integrity, in responsibility, and in standing up for what's right, even when it hurts those closest to you. The truth doesn't always need to be exposed immediately. Sometimes it requires delicate handling, with compassion. But in the end, justice must be served, no matter how painful. And I, Brock Sanderson, had learned that family isn't always the priority. Sometimes justice is the flame that must be kept burning. Standing on the Hamptons beach with the gentle crash of waves and the sunset fading into the horizon, I felt a peace I hadn't realized I needed. Olivia held my hand, and in that moment I understood that this journey, from keeping secrets to protect my family to facing the painful truth, had changed me forever. The truth, however difficult, had freed me from the burden of years spent living for reputation, for expectations. It made me question what truly matters. The honor of the family or being true to myself. I turned to Olivia, her eyes glowing under the sunset's light. "Have you ever had to keep a secret that you knew would hurt someone if it came out?" I asked, my voice low. She smiled, a smile tinged with a hint of melancholy. "Yes, Brock. But I've learned that secrets might protect someone for a moment, but the truth is the only way for people to move forward. As painful as it is, it paves the way for healing." Her words made me reflect. My life, and perhaps yours too, has surely faced such crossroads. Have you ever had to grapple with keeping a secret to protect someone, a friend, a family member, or even yourself, only to realize that the truth was the only path forward. Maybe it was a small secret, like covering up a friend's mistake to keep the peace. Or perhaps it was something bigger, like me, deciding between family reputation and justice for someone who was wronged. This story, with its conflicts, pain, and ultimate liberation, might make you think about the tough choices in your own life. Was there a moment in your family or friendships where you struggled to do the right thing, even if it meant hurting those you love? What did you choose? Silence or speaking out? And how did that choice change you? Share your thoughts if you'd like. Because sometimes speaking out, even just to yourself, is a way to find peace, as I did on this beach beside Olivia, with the waves and the sunset as witnesses.